Welcome back. So just how important is the citrus industry to Florida? According to the Florida Citrus Mutual, our state produces about 65% of all citrus in the U.S. The industry has a total economic impact of approximately $9 billion each year. It is also a job creator, putting more than 75,000 Floridians to work. And joining us for more on the state of the citrus industry is ABC 7 Chief Meteorologist Bob Harrigan. Stephen Futch, a citrus agent for the University of Florida's IFAS extension. He covers Manatee, Sarasota, Hardy, and DeSoto. And joining us by Skype is Dr. Harold Browning, Chief Operating Officer for the Citrus Research and Development Foundation. And Doctor, I'm going to start with you because some of the numbers that we have come up with are just incredible. For instance, years ago, Florida accounted for, I believe, over 200 million boxes of citrus production. And now, according to the latest forecast, it's down to about $72 million. I would imagine that concerns a lot of people like you.
It absolutely does. And the loss of production over the last 10 years has many factors, and the industry at large is having a difficult time responding. Citrus and farming in general are pretty risky businesses, and with weather and diseases, it's very difficult to meet these challenges. So the research that's underway is trying to address these issues and bring solutions forward for the Florida growers.
Now, as you mentioned, there are a lot of factors involved here, but one of them, as we talked about, is the weather. And Bob, you know, the farmer who was in Chris's story talked about how, because it was a warmer winter, the trees are confused about what to do. What have you seen in terms of our weather pattern winter after winter the last few years?
Well, it's interesting. You know, he mentioned that it hasn't been a very cold winter in 10 years. Well, in actuality, in 2010, we had one of the coldest winters on record.
Well.
The water temperature, by the way, in 2010 and 2011, winter of 49 degrees. Right now, the water temperature is 72 degrees. So there's quite a contrast there. Back in 2010, you know, it killed all the snook as well. And as far as the last winter goes, last winter we had a little bit more rainfall and a few more cool spells as well as a result of El Nino. Now, El Nino is gone. La Nina has come back during the months of January and February. It's starting to fade away a little bit, but November, December, and January we had La Nina, which is a large global weather phenomena that does have an impact on winter weather mainly, and that typically creates dry conditions across Florida during the winter, where El Nino, the opposite, creates wet winters and stormy winters.
Stephen, what is a bigger factor, the heat or the lack of precipitation?
The heat has an impact upon the trees not going dormant. Thereby, you don't get a synchronized bloom all at one time. Normally during the winter we are drier. The last 3 years, in 2016, 15, and 14, the winters were a bit wetter. And then this year it's been very dry, only about 1 to 1.3 inches in some locations. But in 2013 through 2011, it was much drier.
But you were saying to me before the show, there are other areas that produce citrus, like in South America, where the temperatures are really hotter. So that in and of itself should not impact the crop.
In many places in the tropics, it does get hotter, and the fruit actually matures faster than it does in Florida.
And Doctor, if I could ask you this, in our next block, we're going to talk about citrus greening, but is the weather and the lack of precipitation or the heat adding stress to these trees and also impacting the amount of fruit that they produce?
Absolutely, Alan, and there is an interaction between the stress caused by weather factors and the stress that's been induced due to the disease that affects the trees throughout Florida. These trees have reduced root systems. They have less ability to move the nutrients from leaves to roots and from roots to fruit, and so as a result, we see kind of an exaggeration of the effects of both weather and the disease on trees in the field, as well as the overall productivity that you mentioned earlier is down so substantially this year.
Now, anybody who goes into the grocery store can see the impact of all this. The amount of fruit that has been available to consumers it just seems different than it has been in years past, correct?
Well, supply and demand is always a big factor in any commodity or any business. And certainly our supply has gone down from 250 million boxes 10, 12 years ago to 70 million. That drives prices higher. And so consumers usually back away from commodities when they start increasing in price.
Okay. We are just getting started in our discussion of Florida's citrus industry and the factors hurting it. We'll continue right after we check the weather with a man named Bob. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the state of Florida's citrus industry. Our guests tonight are ABC 7 Chief Meteorologist Bob Harrigan, Stephen Futch, a citrus agent who covers the Suncoast, and joining us by Skype is Dr. Harold Browning of the Citrus Research and Development Foundation. And Doctor, part of the big problem, as we've been talking about, is citrus screening. And congressmen like Vern Buchanan from here on the Suncoast has worked hard to try to get federal funds to research the problem. Where do we stand both in terms of the money for that research and how that research is going?
Well, Florida has been the epicenter of research on this disease for over 10 years now. And there is a tremendous effort that really first was coordinated by the Florida growers themselves, raising funding, establishing the priorities for research, and investing their own capital in moving together. University of Florida, USDA, and other institutions responded, and a really strong approach began in 2008, 2009. More recently, the state and federal governments have pitched in on trying to support this effort, and tremendous research projects are underway on a broad front to try to combat this disease, looking at the pathogen itself as it moves into the plant, the insect vector that moves the disease from tree to tree, and then ultimately looking at resistance and other ways for growers to help the health of the tree be promoted as they battle this disease.
Now, it's important to note that it's not just citrus screening or the weather that is impacting the citrus industry. It's also development. You know, my parents used to live down in South Florida, and their development was surrounded by all these citrus groves. They're all gone. And it's not happening just down there, it's happening all around us here. So the amount of lake acreage is not what it used to be.
Absolutely. The acreage have decreased from 850,000 acres at our peak down, and now we're about 480,000 acres. So we've lost a significant amount of the acreage. Part of that is due to canker, freezes, diseases, disorders, and part of it's price and economics.
And that has an impact in terms of how much we pay for citrus when we go to the store.
Absolutely.
The question becomes, can we turn this around? I mean, there's one thing that we, I was dare to say, can't control, which is Mother Nature, although...
Oh, they're trying. I mean, there are some...
They're trying. And you saw that farmer in Chris's piece talk about that he believes that global warming is real and having a real impact on his business.
Right. And, you know, the thing is that the weather in terms of climate has been changing and rearranging for the past couple hundred years. In fact, you look all the way back, it's been changing and rearranging. But recently, we have seen more extremes. You know, in 2010, the most extreme winter that we had right there. And also, this particular winter so far, this is ranking as the top 10 to top 15 driest and warmest on record here in the state of Florida, which is not too out of the ordinary in terms of a La Nina situation, but still it has been unusually dry and unusually warm. And if you get by typically the mid part of February, freezes become less and less frequent. There's less of a chance for a freeze, which is also a big factor when it comes to the citrus industry.
So, Dr. Brownlee, when you hear the farmer that was in Christopher's piece talk about that it seems like his trees are confused about whether to bloom, you understand what he's talking about.
Absolutely. And one of the challenges that we have is that all of our practices are governed by a predictable seasonality to citrus production. And so when you have extended or early flushing and bloom, it affects the insect populations, it affects the disease pressure, it affects a lot of the elements that go into citrus production. And so growers are struggling not only with this disease and the uncertainties associated with it, but also how to manage their inputs and optimize the growth that they have with a very major change in seasonality that we're experiencing.
Stephen, there are a lot of obstacles here and challenges for growers, not only citrus screening, the weather they have no control over, some are selling off their property. The question is, can the industry here in Florida make a rebound? I don't know if anybody could expect that we'll go back to the 1990s where we were selling 244 million boxes of citrus a year, but what can we hope for?
There will always be a citrus industry in Florida. There's no doubt about that. But the industry will change, and those that adapt to change will be successful. You know, in any business, in any model of business that there is, things change. And those that are the adapters survive, and those that relish in the past and refuse to adapt new technology, new methods, those are the ones that suffer.
And Bob, you talked about the shifting weather patterns. Is it too early to say what we could expect next winter and maybe, next few years?
No, it's not actually. We just checked from NOAA and their climatic data center. Indications are that some of the reliable models are suggesting that we're going to get back into an El Nino year, which is a little unusual to go from El Nino to a weak La Nina back to El Nino so quickly. It's usually about 4 to 7 years you have this variation, and that's the warming of the Eastern Pacific. But this particular model, the European forecast model, is suggesting that we will have an El Nino winter next winter, which usually means a wetter winter and a cool winter, not extremely cold. And I heard the doctors say that, the early bloom and so on and so forth. I know that the citrus industry likes a close to freezing temperature sometimes. It makes the trees hardier. They don't like a hard freeze, obviously. And the strawberry industry really kind of looks forward to a little bit colder season because it makes the fruit a little sweeter in terms of the strawberries. So this lack of cold air really that has moved down in the state is not the best news.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, so stay with us. Welcome back. Citrus screening, record heat, low rainfall totals, all these are factors to take a toll on our citrus industry, but is there an impact that you will notice? And our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Dr. Browning, what can people who are watching this now, who like their orange juice and like their fruit, can expect in the months and years to come?
I would start by just saying that the growers and citrus growers in particular are resilient. The path forward is not clear, but it certainly includes, through research, developing short-term tools that growers can use to continue the sustainability of groves that you see as you drive around Florida, to produce fruit, to keep the whole system moving and providing that fruit and juice products to the market. Longer term, it will involve more durable, sustainable solutions that would include resistant or tolerant plants. And by the way, those plants will need to be able to respond to the changing weather environment as well. I think the Florida industry is grateful for the leadership that's been shown in Congress and in the state levels to help provide the funding to sustain this effort. And only through research are we going to get there.
And Bob, talking about changing weather patterns, there is even something else that you've been noticing.
Yeah, I tell you, we look at all different kinds of aspects of the weather and how it changes. We have the Madden-Julian oscillation, which is now being studied more and more now by meteorologists. We're getting more information into the computers, and the computers, as they get bigger and stronger, are able to project out into the future a little bit better, and that would help the farmers and the citrus growers tremendously. And there's such a big industry in that right now in terms of predicting what the futures are going to be.
And Stephen, do growers have access to all this information as long as the aid and research for that the government is providing?
Yes, the growers have access to information through the internet, through the University of Florida, through other agencies as well, to provide them with the latest information to enable them to be as productive as possible and sustainable.
Okay. Thank you to our guests for being here tonight. Bob Harrigan is Chief Meteorologist for ABC 7 News. Stephen Futch is a citrus agent for the University of Florida IFAS Extension. He covers the counties including Manatee and Sarasota. And Dr. Howard Browning joined us by Skype. He is the Chief Operating Officer for the Citrus Research and Development Foundation.